Episode 35 of The Burrows. I'm Kevin Bunk, joined by Michael Merlo every week throughout baseball season, talking Mets, talking Yankees, and spring training obviously underway. I was away last week, but we did get an episode in on Monday. You could check these all out afterwards on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, but live every week for The Burrows throughout the season, at least once a week, hopefully more. We're planning on more. But, Mike, the title of this episode, Spring Training Panic. We're into that week of games being played, and that started late last week, and now you see a couple injuries pop up. And basically the whole theme of this episode is how rational is it to panic about spring training injuries, spring training performances. And I think the Frankie Montas thing was a little worrisome for Mets fans. And then Sean Manaea yesterday, if that's serious, then it is a little bit of a panic situation if you are a fan of the Mets.
Certainly a panic situation if it is serious. I'm already at the point, and we're not even a week into playing spring training games. I mean, we're literally 5 days into playing spring training games, and it was cool to watch the first game. Like, okay, that's great. Soto's on the field, Lindor's on the field. That's great. I'm already sick of it. I'm already done. And this is like a new record for me for spring training. I want it to be over. I just want to get to the start of the season. I don't want to have to sit here and worry about reading a tweet that says this guy's hurt or this guy's hurt. Enough. Montas, you could sort of survive even if it is for a few months. But if you lose Manaea for an extended period of time, you're going to have a serious problem.
And now you have to pivot. And I had posted a video yesterday about how I think the Mets pitching staff, you look at it on paper, and we're not sitting here trying to knock the Mets. This is a concerning pitching staff. Very underwhelming group of names. Do I think that they'll get by for a couple of weeks until Manaea comes back? If it's the case where, he misses 2-3 weeks of April, they'll survive. But if it's longer than that, obliques tend to linger. It's trouble. But where do they pivot now? Is Sproat a guy that they call up? Because all the comments are saying Sproat, but I don't think that's happening. And then you look at the veteran market. I don't think Quintana comes back, and I don't think they're in a position right now to end up landing Cease or King.
No, right now, I think Cease or King, they're possibilities if the Padres fall out of it and you get to the deadline. I think that's where they become possibilities. At this moment, no, they're not. And you look at Quintana. If Quintana, remember, the Mets are so over that tax. So Quintana does not cost Steve Cohen $12 million, $15 million, whatever it is. It's times 2 that. It's a lot for just Jose Quintana for 1 year. So I think if they got bad news on Manaea yesterday that he was going to miss a few months, I think they would pivot to Jose Quintana. But right now, it doesn't seem like they're too concerned about Manaea, that he could be back by mid to late April. And they're not going to, and they shouldn't make a move just based on that. They shouldn't go out there and sign Jose Quintana for just that. And by the way, Sproat's not coming up. He needs some time. You said it. He needs some time in AAA. He's not coming up anytime soon.
My fear with Manaea is obviously just 33-year-old starter, oblique injury. A lot of times what we see in these scenarios is guy comes back in 5 weeks and right back to the IL after a start or a bullpen session because he just can't go. And that injury, a hamstring injury, groin, they're such pains. They just seem to linger, man. And these guys miss so much time, or they come back and play and they're just not themselves while pitching. They don't, they end up 4 ERA before the All-Star break, and you're like, what happened to Sean Manaea? Well, he probably never recovered. I hope that's not the case. We love Sean Manaea here. We made that clear last season. We both love him. We were pumped they re-signed him. So I hope he's all right. Hope he misses 1 or 2 starts in the beginning of the year, and it's more precautionary, and then he's fine. But yeah, this Mets pitching staff, Mike, I mean, I know Clay Holmes looked pretty good the other day, but that's another thing is I want to talk about that too. How do you, on the other end of the spectrum, enjoy certain spring training performances? I mean, you get the Soto home run, Soto's going to be great. Yeah. So fine. You're just excited for it because he's already playing well. Then sometimes you'll see a guy like Judge stink for 6 weeks of spring training and then he wins MVP. So how do we sit here and take anything from spring training? Because Clay Holmes looked like a Cy Young winner in his first spring training outing.
I don't tend to care how the hitters look in spring training. I do focus in on what the pitchers look like early. I do. And granted, Clay Holmes faced a AAA lineup. with Ben Gamel. So I'm not Ben Gamel's a major league. Okay, come on. He did face AAA lineup the other day. So you got to take that with a grain of salt. Look, I think I'd be a lot more confident in the Met rotation, right? If you didn't have Clay Holmes transitioning to a starter for the first time, I think really in his major league career, right? I think he made a couple of starts early, but he really was never a starter.
Mm-hmm.
I would be more confident if they had Kodai Senga coming off a really good season. Okay, but they don't have that. So, yeah, you have to be concerned if you're a Mets fan. I like the rotation coming in. I thought the rotation was better than people thought coming in. I was a little bit more optimistic. But at this point, how are you not concerned? You lose one of your horses at the top. You lose a guy who I thought was going to at least give them innings this season in Montas for at least 2 months. You got to be concerned. But if Manaea is not out too long, then you can live with this and you could survive this.
And Griffin Canning is a guy who, when they signed him, it was whatever. He stinks. He's awful. He was literally one of the worst pitchers in the league last year.
Yeah,
like
no, I'm aware.
Analytics suggests that Griffin Canning is a high school pitcher.
Yeah.
And now he's thrust where he went from swing guy, seventh arm. He's now thrust into being the fourth or fifth starter to start the year. And it's wildly concerning. And Blackburn too, who I like more than Canning, but
I don't hate Blackburn as like that sixth guy, fifth guy, whatever. I'm not going to argue Blackburn with you. McGill obviously gets slotted in here and will most likely make this roster on the opening day roster. He'll probably pitch opening day again. I think he's pitched more opening days in the last few years than any Mets pitcher. So McGill probably would be the favorite to start opening day because that's just the way it goes. The one thing I'll say is they want to go with the 6-man, right, for Kodai Senga.
Yeah.
They don't have to go to six guys until like mid-April, which is one of the saving graces right now because of all the days off. As long as they maneuver the staff in a way where they can have Senga have every sixth day off, which is possible. They don't have to go to six guys. They can go to
also,
five.
I think people are forgetting how good David Peterson was last year. Just how solid he was last year. I understand that he's not, Screwball, and he's not really your great young star rising up the ranks, but Peterson's a good arm. Peterson's an arm that I think fits into the top 5 of about 28 clubs in baseball.
The one thing I'll say, and I would agree with that, the one thing I'll say, and I don't know how much I'm going to run with this or believe this. I kind of want to forget about it, but the advanced stats tell you he was lucky last season and he's due for a regression. Now, again, he was solid. He did make some big starts for them, especially late in the season. So we'll see what happens. He was great out of the bullpen in the postseason as well, stepping up for them. So the advanced stats tell you, I would be a little worried about David. But yeah, people forget about how great Kodai is too, including myself. It's just people are worried whether or not he can stay healthy. He was fantastic in that 23 season. And if you get that guy, you're going to be just fine.
David Peterson last year too, 2.9 ERA. He was 10-3. He had a 3 WAR, 121 innings pitched, gave up 39 runs in 121 innings pitched. That's a really nice year for a guy that had no expectations. And his whip was 1.2, ERA plus 136. That's a nice season. And so his regression could look like a good pitcher still. Because last year, if he puts up the numbers he put up last year and say maybe this year he pitches 150, 160 innings instead of 120, he's going to move into the status of one of the better 2s or 3s in the entire league. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's going to regress a little bit, but his regression could still be giving you 25 really nice starts and confident starts throughout the season.
Can I get a 3.4 ERA and a ERA plus of 120? I'd sign for that on the dotted line right now. That's a very, that's a 3-starter, right? Like you're like, oh yeah, that I'm good with that. He's starting game 3 of a postseason series. And I'm good with that.
Obviously, Stearns and his regimes have a history of developing pitchers and improving pitchers who have already been failed in the league,
Mm-hmm.
for lack of a better term. And Peterson, you notice the one big difference last year was his strikeouts went down, his ground balls went up, and his numbers all went down. Everything improved, down meaning his numbers got better,
ERA,
but everything
runs,
improved for Peterson last year, except for his strikeout rate. He was down like 3 or 4 strikeouts K through 9 last year. He was down 3 or 4 per K through 9. So I think Peterson could have a nice year here. I think that maybe the analytics are too harsh on pitchers that force the ball in play sometimes too, and showing regression. The hard hit ball stats sometimes. I don't know what analytics Peterson has that affect that.
His expected ERA wasn't that great. It was like it was in the 4s. I'm pretty sure.
And while I don't love expected ERA and analytics of that nature, they definitely have correlated a bit to guys being 1-year wonders in the last 6-7 years since expected ERA has actually been being used. But yeah, Mets pitching staff, the big fear.
Not what you want.
Big fear for me is Manaea isn't himself until mid-May, late May, which is when Montas is probably going to come back. If Montas gets shut down 6 to 8 weeks, as they said, that means he's not going to start working out for another 6 to 8 weeks. So he's going to be out a little bit. And if Manaea is not himself for a month and a half to start the season, which might not be the case, then the Braves and Phillies could really gain some ground on you.
That's the problem. That's the biggest problem. You're in such a tight division. You're in such a tight league that you really can't have, and I'm not even talking about the start they had last season. You can't have a stretch in which you lose, you go on a big losing streak. You just can't have that. You got to limit those streaks as much as possible. So this is why it's brutal, because you play the division's so tough. I mean, I think it's the best division in baseball. When you have those 3 teams at the top, I think it's better than is it better than the NL West?
I think the West is better. It's going to be a big topic on our prediction show in 2-3 weeks, but
it could be better than the West.
I think the Diamondbacks might be the second best team in the league.
In the National League?
No, in Major League Baseball.
Are you kidding?
And I'm going to talk about it a lot in 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks when we do our prediction. We're going to do our predictions before opening day. Our opening day episode will be its own thing that week, but the week before we'll do predictions. I think the Diamondbacks might end up being the second best team, maybe third best team in the entire league.
Crazy. See, we kind of spoke about it a little bit. Like, I like the Diamondbacks, and you were like, yeah, I like the Diamondbacks too. I don't like the Diamondbacks that much. That's crazy.
I'm starting to like the Diamondbacks that much. And we'll talk about it later on. But, NL East, I'd probably take the top 3 teams because I do feel like the Padres are in for the regression out of those 6 teams. If we want to take those 6 teams into account, they're obviously the 6 best teams in the National League. There's not a team in the Central better than any of those 6.
Right.
The Padres, with the guys that they lost, and just I feel like when you have an offseason the way the Padres just did, it almost just sets in a culture of the organization's not really trying to win right now. And we just lost Scott to the Dodgers, and we didn't sign anybody. And there's rumors that we're going to trade Caesar King. I feel like that's a bad locker room omen when front offices do that.
Yeah, I think they'll just miss the playoffs. Like, they'll be one of those teams that they're over 500. Maybe they're 84, 85 wins. I would agree. I certainly like the Diamondbacks better. That's better than the Yankees, better than the Phillies, the Braves, and the Mets.
Yeah. I think the Diamondbacks right now I definitely like more than the Phillies. Definitely like them more than the Padres.
100%. I agree with the Padres. I don't even know if I can agree with the Phillies.
The Mets, for me, I want to talk about this next. The lack of starting pitching, and we're going to talk about the argument of paying pitchers versus hitters.
Yeah, I'd love to have this, yeah.
But the lack of starting pitching for the Mets, I just don't see how there isn't a stretch of the year where they get absolutely teed off on, even if it's just 2-3 weeks, but in big games. I do. Every team has their bad stretch, right? Every team has the slump in the middle of the season that you feel like lasts months, and it's really just a 2-week thing, 10-day thing. I can't see the Mets starting pitching not catching up with them at some point in the regular season.
I mean,
For them to win,
I don't want to say that. Like, I don't want to say that. I don't think it's going to happen. I trust what this regime, what these guys are doing. I don't think David Stearns goes out there and pays Clay Holmes $40 million because he thinks, oh, we'll take a chance. Here's a gamble. It's a gamble, but I think it's a serious, educated guess.
Let me throw you a hypothetical then.
All right, go.
To take any sort of bias, and I think you're very good at taking bias out of the Mets, but it's a very exciting season coming up, so it might be difficult to do.
Yep.
And we'll both agree right before we start, Mets are very good, so we're not saying otherwise.
They're a playoff team. We both agree they're a playoff team. Okay.
If David Stearns' Milwaukee Brewers with Christian Yelich as the MVP, so it's like having Lindor and a couple other good hitters on that squad. That was a good team. They went to the NLCS. Very similar.
Very good team.
If that team followed it up the next year and got a massive name like Bryce Harper, like Manny Machado, if they followed it up and did that, and then their starting rotation going into the next season was Senga, Holmes, Peterson, McGill, Canning, and Blackburn, you would not sit here and say that staff wouldn't catch up with them. There's no way. I know that they have Manaea too. Like, Manaea is obviously a part of this equation. We can't just rule him out. But Montas also. Montas sucks in his career. And I get the optimism from a Mets fan that he'll have a nice 3.6, 3.7 ERA season. He sucks in his career.
No, he hasn't been good. I did have some optimism that he would be that guy, like a high threes, but ate some innings, kind of like what Severino was last season. But either way, if it was any other, like, there are some executives, I think, in this league that you just have to trust. You have to have this blind faith, right? Like, it's like the systems in the NFL. You look at a coach and you're like, I trust that guy. I know no matter what's going to happen, whatever the paper says, the roster says, I know he's going to figure something out. And right now, on February 25th, 2025, after the season that the Mets had in 2024, I have to have that blind faith that this is going to work out over the long haul. Could it be a struggle early when you have a guy like Griffin Canning in the rotation for a couple of weeks? Sure, that could be a major issue. But I think they've built up the bullpen to where I'm extremely confident. And I think healthy, this rotation could be good. Now, listen, we may never see them fully healthy. Technically, we may never see this rotation fully healthy, and we would never know what it would have looked like. But if they're healthy, and that's a big if right now, I think they're going to be fine.
All right, I want to talk quick about the argument that we've been not having with each other. I think we kind of agree with each other, but
teased it yesterday.
We teased it a little bit, texting each other. More important to pay hitters or more important to pay pitchers? Where should you focus your payroll? And I struggle with this because I think the Mets are a perfect polarizing team in this argument. And the Yankees, obviously, this offseason had put themselves on the other side of it, paying Max Fried the big contract after losing out on Soto. The issue I have with the Mets and not spending on the pitching is, how do you trust them? And we know that sometimes the inferior pitcher wins in big games. That's not impossible. But how do you trust the Mets to pitch in those big series, big games late in the year and in the postseason against all the contenders in their league, all of whom have better starting pitching? The Dodgers have a better starter at every spot in their five. The Diamondbacks have better starters in a playoff series. The Padres have better starters in a playoff series. The Braves might have better starters in the playoff series. They probably will, barring health. I don't count on them having all their guys. But in Philadelphia has better starters. So how do you trust them that the Mets can go toe-to-toe with these teams?
Right there. Exactly what you just said. I don't trust that they're going to have all their guys. There are certain players, there are certain hitters, right, that there are years where we just expect guys to get hurt. I mean, unfortunately, you expect Mike Trout to get hurt, right? You expect Giancarlo Stanton to land on the IL, and there's many more, right? And big time offensive players that are paid a crap ton. You expect them to go on the IL. But I feel like there's more pitchers, and I feel like there's more risk. I mean, I heard Jeremy Hefner do an interview a couple of weeks ago, the Met pitching coach, and he was talking about trying to keep these pitchers healthy. And he's like, listen, it is a very unusual motion of cocking your arm back and throwing the ball as hard as you possibly can. That is not normal, and that's going to lead to injuries. And when you're throwing the ball and trying to throw the ball harder than pitchers have ever done it in the history of the game, when you have so much spin on the ball and you're trying to make the ball move as much as possible, I mean, you're going to strain your arm. You're going to strain something. There's just so much more risk, I think, paying these pitchers that I see it. I saw this take from Sal Licata. We laugh at him sometimes. I think he's right. I don't know if I would go the Yankee route of investing so much money in my starting pitchers. Now, listen, there are exceptions. I would invest money in the younger pitchers. If a younger guy became available, I would pay that guy. But the guys that are close to their 30s, in their 30s, I feel like it's more of a risk than anything else. I'd rather pay a hitter in his 30s than pay a pitcher in his 30s.
It's like the Red Sox going out and getting Crochet, putting big assets into getting Crochet, and probably to extend him because they know they're getting a younger arm.
Exactly.
And his bad years will come either at the end of the contract or after the contract, whereas a guy like Max Fried, his bad years might come in 2 or 3 years. And
halfway through that 8-year contract, you could start seeing that, yes.
But then I'm looking for teams to win a World Series without having big money pitchers on the team. And if they didn't have big money pitchers, without having an absolute young homegrown ace on the squad. And you, interestingly, go back 1 year, and Texas has no big money pitchers pitching in the World Series because they lost DeGrom.
Yep.
And Scherzer was not, I'm not counting him. I mean, he was on the team, but he wasn't
great.
Yeah. But other than Texas last year, it's really hard to find a team that didn't have a healthy investment into their pitching staff, like healthier than the Mets have right now.
The Dodgers won with the bullpen last season.
Yeah, but they also had a $326 million rookie pitcher who pitched 2 great games in the World Series.
Okay, but
Jack
he was
deadline ad also.
He was banged up throughout the season, and he came back, and I mean, he gave them a couple of big starts, but there were games where he only went 3 or 4 innings.
He didn't have a great postseason, but he had a very good 2 outings in the World Series.
So you have Yamamoto, you have Flaherty, who was traded. They traded for him at the deadline. He's not a big money pitcher. Glasnow didn't make any starts.
Big Ed that didn't play.
Obviously,
I'm counting the Dodgers. I mean, when you just talking about,
I can't count the Dodgers when they beat both of our teams with bullpen games. I can't count them.
But they put an investment into the starting pitching. It still stands that they did. And Yamamoto,
but the investment didn't work last season.
But they made plenty of starts that got the Dodgers home field advantage throughout. They had a very significant impact. Remember beating the Yankees in June, scoring 1 or 2 runs a game because Yamamoto went 7 innings?
Yes, okay. Getting them to the postseason, fine. But when you got to the postseason, when people say having these big-time horses at the top of your rotation is so important, they didn't have those guys late in the season because they were all banged up.
Then you go to the rest of the squads that have won World Series. Houston had that every time they got there or won. Houston had big-time starters going. Obviously, Verlander, who wasn't even great in the postseason, but Verlander was always giving them starts. You had Valdez always giving them starts. Even Charlie Morton, how many times has Charlie Morton been the quality $12 to $18 million ad that maybe the Mets made with Montas or with Manaea? Maybe they become a guy like that. But even, the Red Sox, they have David Price, they have Chris Sale when they win the World Series.
What about the Braves that year? Who do they have? The Nationals are
the all-time
starting pitcher. Yeah.
Biggest start because they lose Harper and win the World Series because of Scherzer.
They also just pulled somebody up too from JV and replaced them easily. You know?
All I remember for that team is Anthony Rendon.
Yeah, I remember Juan Soto to big home runs that year. So
don't even know if he was on that team. That team was loaded too. If you look back at that team was stacked. How they were in near last place at the deadline, I will never know. I mean, in July, every sports radio station in New York was saying, could Scherzer be traded to the Yankees? Could they be acquiring one of these national starters?
They were done. And then, I don't know if you remember, but the Mets, they played the Mets on a Friday night, okay? And the Mets were down 6-3, and Doolittle's in the game. And Doolittle was good up until this point this year. And Doolittle up 4 runs. The Todd Frazier game-tying home run, right? And at that moment, I was probably thinking the Mets are going to make the playoffs, but the Nationals were kind of gaining steam to the National League wild card, and I was like, that team is certainly not making the playoffs. I'm like, that is not a playoff team. I remember sitting there vividly like, how are they going to finish the season and make the playoffs? And, well, they did that. They won the World Series, so.
Yeah.
That's an interesting team. It's a very interesting team.
And they were low. I mean, none of those guys are still on the squad, but they had Trey Turner. They had Rendon, who I thought should have won MVP that year. They had Soto.
Who won it in 19?
Let me look.
I usually have my baseball reference page open, and I didn't. I'll pull it up. You're good.
Bellinger. I don't know if that was 18 or 19.
Your guy.
My guy, Bellinger. Yeah, Yankees have a couple MVPs. That's why Yankees did it perfectly. They added 2 MVP bats and Cy Young level lefty pitcher. That's how you spend.
Right.
2 bats that have won MVPs. Now they have 4 in their lineup.
Right. Mm-hmm. Certainly. Yeah, it was Bellinger, Yelich. That was a great battle. Yelich in 130 games hit 44 home runs and had 1,100 OPS and a 7 WAR. Bellinger in 156 games.
First place vote.
Yeah, I kind of feel like those 2 guys were ahead of him, though.
Rendon was my guy that year. I loved Rendon that year. Josh Donaldson got a 6th place vote on Atlanta that year.
What have you paid him?
What? What I've paid Rendon?
Yeah.
Not what LA gave him, but I wouldn't have wanted to give him that long of a deal. Because he was never a great enough athlete.
But you would have paid him.
Yeah, I would have paid him. If I was Washington, I would have matched that from LA just to keep the guy.
The guy 9th that year. He must have been like 25 at that point with that season. Sorry. He was 20. What about Kevin? I just think you're at a point right now with the way these pitchers get injured. I don't want any part of it. Develop your pitching.
And the fact that they're averaging 5 innings a game across the league.
That's the other problem. You're so reliant on your bullpen. I feel like the more common denominator, besides for the Rangers in 2023, the most common denominator between World Series teams is a great bullpen. And if you have that really good bullpen with weapons, with guys that could go multiple innings late in the game and close games, I feel like that is more so of a weapon at this point than having a guy that can go 7 or 8 innings. I mean, we just don't use our starting pitchers like that. And I hate that because I love good starting pitching, and I want to see starters go deep in the games.
You know what else, too, is a common denominator with these teams is managers who have proven time and time again. It's not just, they won a World Series, so they're a great manager now. Not doing that in hindsight. It's managers who are able to truly affect the outcomes of games with their bullpen decisions win these World Series. Because I think Dave Roberts absolutely can. I know that he gets a lot of hate, but I think Dave Roberts absolutely is one of the 5 best managers in baseball.
See, I've always been a Dave Roberts guy, and I used to get hate for that, especially at school with some fans of other teams. And I think Dave Roberts in this postseason, with the job that he did, it was one of the better managing jobs we've seen in a very long time. what he was able to do, managing that bullpen and that starting rotation, having to deal with one of his best players, hurting the ankle and having a tough year emotionally. Obviously, Freddie Freeman dealt with a lot. He's banged up. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? They're down to, they're facing elimination in San Diego. They dealt with a lot in that postseason alone. And the job that he did was unbelievable.
He was great. He was terrific. And then you look at the rest of the managers. Obviously, Bochy in the last 15 years has won 4. You have Dusty Baker, AJ Hinch with Houston. It's just an elite group of, Martinez with Washington, Madden with the Cubs. These are guys that throughout their career proved to be elite game managers and bullpen managers.
Yeah.
Do the Yankees or Mets have that? We'll see. We will learn in the next couple of years whether or not.
I feel like if Boone is that guy or not. I think you could give me your answer.
I don't think he's one of those guys. I think he's very tough to replace, but I don't think he's one of the elite. I don't think he's in the category of Roberts or Cora or Hinch. I don't put him up there at all.
He's in the next tier of guys.
He is, and that's tough to replace. When you have one of those guys, you typically don't move off of them because who's out there? I love the Yankee fans are always saying, well, Don Mattingly should be the manager. If Don Mattingly didn't play for the Yankees, no one would sit here and say Don Mattingly should run the baseball team.
He also shouldn't be the manager. How about that?
Exactly. He just should not be the manager. If he should be the manager of the Yankees, he'd be managing somewhere right now, not the bench coach for the Toronto Blue Jays.
And I think with Mendoza, you don't know yet. It was a great first season. I think the guys love him, and he's I think he'd be a culture builder. But I don't know if he can affect the game in terms of his management skills, managing the bullpen and things like that. We don't know yet. It was a great first year. We'll see what happens. You don't know yet.
Now that they have Soto, now that they've spent the money, they have the expectations after going to the championship series. Everything he's going to do for the next 3, 4, 5 years, however long he's there, is going to be under a microscope in the biggest way possible, because now you're there. I've been telling Mets fans, it's the best place to be is where you're competing. And I don't have to tell you this because you understand it, but at times being good and having World Series expectations is not as fun as the OMG Grimace ride that we all just took.
Nothing's going to be as fun as that. That's the problem, and that's what you got to prepare yourself for. But you obviously want to be in these spots where you're contending for a championship every year, and everybody expects you to do that, and that's where they are. And I think Mendoza's going to handle the pressure perfectly fine. I have a confidence in Mendoza that he's going to be the manager for a very long time, and I think Stearns and Cohen believe that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think Mendoza last year did nothing for you to lack confidence in him and his ability. No. He just obviously has a great connection with the guys, kind of like Rojas had.
Yeah, totally. That's the Yankee manager. That's the future Yankee manager. He's standing on third base.
I will say, I'm surprised Rojas hasn't gotten a job.
It's a train wreck with the Mets.
He's terrible with the Mets. I'm shocked he hasn't gotten a job.
Yeah, that's why he didn't get a job. He's a train wreck.
I'm very surprised he has not found himself a job yet.
He's replacing Boone. That's what it is. After the 2 years are up here with the extension, he's going to get the job. That's it.
All right, let's talk a little Yankees here while we're on.
Yeah.
Stanton.
Hal. All right, we'll start with Stanton.
Ease into the Hal. But Stanton, very odd situation with the elbows. First of all, how did Giancarlo Stanton get tennis elbow in both elbows? I've seen him move. He's not playing tennis. And
you would know.
I would know. That guy's not playing any tennis. And to get tennis elbow in both elbows, I don't understand how that happens.
I'll tell you what. JD Martinez, obviously, is a big pickleball player. So maybe he's playing pickleball and he's got the tennis elbow from the pickleball.
Could be, but
what if it came out that he injured himself? I know he dealt with the elbows last year, so this is just a completely hypothetical situation. Yeah. But what would you do if it came out and he was playing like hardcore tennis or pickleball this offseason and he hurt his elbows?
Well, I wouldn't be that upset about him playing hardcore recreational sports in the offseason. I'd be pretty pissed though that he's playing tennis and pickleball and he can't run to first base. Because if you're playing tennis or pickleball as a 34 years old, 33 years old,
He's
world-class athlete, then you should be able to leg out a double.
He's incapable of that.
He can't do it. He literally can't do it.
There's a lot of concern though, because we sort of touched on it last week, where this guy is slated to be the protection of the lineup for Aaron Judge, and now you need to sort of rework this lineup, and nobody really knows when he's coming back. Nobody knows what he's doing in New York right now. It was reported first that he was going to see a doctor in New York, and now it's for a personal reason. I'd also read yesterday that there was talk about him possibly having surgery in the offseason, and he declined it or something like that, and he didn't want to go through the recovery, and now we're sitting here and he's going to miss some time. It's a really weird situation what's going on here.
And now, and we'll talk about Arenado in a little bit, but now you look at the Yankees lineup and they have no DH, they have no third baseman, and they have no backup catcher, which you can scoff at here in February, but these are serious holes. Backup catcher, I believe, is a serious hole if you don't have one. We saw early in the year with the Mets last year before they got Torrens that having no backup catcher, having no other option defensively or whatever, you don't even need a good offensive catcher. You just need a guy that can really play it defensively and give you a 215, 220 bat when he plays. But the holes in the lineup are concerning. And then you have the Hal Steinbrenner moment of Yankees are out of loot. And I don't even know what to say to that.
It's shocking. Because you have this core of players here. And when I mean by core, I mean the older guys on this team. You need to get Aaron Judge a World Series. You need to give this guy a ring, right? He needs to win one. And I don't know where you are in his career, but you're not at the front end of his prime, right? You're probably at the back end of his prime. I'm not saying he's going to fall off in the next 2 years, but you're getting closer to the fall off. You need to do whatever you can within his window here of being an elite player, the best hitter in baseball. You need to do whatever you can to win a World Series. They've spent money. I'm not calling him cheap, but leaving a couple of holes in the middle of this lineup, that's going to affect him. I mean, there is no reason to pitch to this guy. None. I would walk him every single time he came up to the plate. I'll face Jazz. I'll face Cody. I'll face Goldschmidt. I don't care. There's no reason to pitch to this guy. None.
No, there's not. And that's why, and I hate to keep harping on it, but we're going to all season long probably. That's why Soto was such an ideal ad for the Yankees, because you're getting at least the last 6-7 years of Judge's career, Soto in his prime as a hitter. So you felt good about the fact that even when Judge dips, you still have an all-world player hitting right in front of him that can continue production in the lineup. Now, the future with Judge's running mate, whoever that may be, feels very uncertain, because Stanton is the guy that was brought in to be the guy that hits next to Judge or one spot away from him if he doesn't hit next to him. And they just rake together, both hit, 100 home runs a year together and dominate, win World Series. They haven't won the World Series. Stanton has tennis elbow in both of his elbows. He can't run to first base anymore. And he's only around for 4 weeks. Great that it's in October, but that's it. What about the rest of the year? So I'm worried about this Yankee lineup. I'm worried about their ability to get Judge a ring. Does it not just feel like the Mattingly script is being rewritten? One of the best players ever in franchise history.
Beloved.
Great hitter, beloved captain, leader of the team. Great hitter. And he is a great defensive player, I think. I mean, center field last year, he had his moments, of course. But in right field, he's just an all-world defender. And it feels like a straight trajectory to winning absolutely nothing.
And probably a better player. I mean, definitely a better player, all time than Mattingly will end up being if he isn't right now.
Judge is going to be a Hall of Famer if he doesn't get a ring. He could retire today. He's going to get into the Hall of Fame.
So I harp on this, okay? And I'm not saying we're playing Monday morning quarterback with what I'm about to say. But I look at the rotation, right? And I see, all right, you got Cole at the top. You have Rodon there, and we're excluding Fried from this. and Heel had a really nice season, but he was banged up and they had innings limits, and Schmidt was hurt last year, but he was really good when he pitched, and I like Clark Schmidt a lot. But a couple of injury concerns, and Rodon might suck. But either way, I don't know if adding a pitcher for $200 million was exactly what they needed.
Then I would just ask, what was the pivot?
Right. That's the question. Do you go and get Bregman for, instead of the long-term contract to Fried? Because when they signed Fried, I was on the side of, well, you're not giving another long-term contract out. That's just not going to happen. So
yeah,
I had said this on the show. You're not going to go and pay Bregman 6-7 years. But if you didn't sign Fried and you decided to go with Bregman, who's really good defensively at third, then maybe I would have paid him to grab that bat to fill that hole. Obviously, he's not going to replace what Soto was, but at least you're adding some sort of protection, and you're protecting yourself from a Stanton injury because you know he's going to be hurt at some point. I don't know. Everybody loves the pivot from the Yankees, and that's fine. They got better defensively, and they're more athletic, and their pitching is better, but you're not better in the ways that you needed to improve your team. Like, you don't have that other bat. And I think offensively, you're going to go through weeks where, whether it's a Judge slump for a week or literally Judge is on a hot streak and then bang, nobody is pitching to him, you're going to go on some cold streaks offensively if these guys aren't picking up the slack. And we've seen this in the past. We saw this in 22, in the middle of the year, when they got cold and Judge was not being pitched to.
The area the Yankees really improved in is not Max Fried, it's Devin Williams. That's where they really get a lot better. But think about the perspective of all of it. How impactful was Soto in the games that Clay Holmes blew? You know, you had the lead in those games. So how many of those games are you no longer winning because Soto's not in your lineup, because your team couldn't score more than 2 runs that night? And that is a reality the Yankees are going to face. They're relying on 3 things, Mike, and we've talked about it all this offseason, but 3 things that they're relying on to happen. 1 is Bellinger has a big season.
Mm-hmm.
2, Goldschmidt looks like one of the 15 best first basemen in baseball. Not a huge ask, but maybe for a guy who's got a year or 2 left in the tank and is coming off the worst season of his career in St. Louis, where he was awful.
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing that they are relying on, that I absolutely can't stand that they're relying on, is Jason Dominguez being really good right out of the gate here. His first full season of run, they're relying on him and counting on him to be one of the best left fielders in Major League Baseball. And we already saw him drop the 2 pop-ups the other day, and that's not indicative of how he'll hit, but I am very worried about his adjustment and how quickly he can get up to speed when you feel like you're against the clock in the career of Aaron Judge.
The Yankees have not done a good job with giving these prospects, especially lately, like a soft landing spot. You know what I mean? There's already enough pressure being a big-time prospect on the New York Yankees and playing in New York and being under the bright lights. There's already that pressure. But now you're bringing these guys up like Volpe, like Dominguez, and you're saying, we're in the middle of a pennant race. You're going to slot in to be the everyday shortstop. You're going to slot in and you're going to essentially be the replacement for Juan Soto, right? I mean, really, that could be Bellinger, but you're one of those replacements. That's a big ask for young players, especially Dominguez, who we've heard so much about. There's already a ton of pressure on him regardless. The Martian, this and that. It's been 4 years now of Jason Dominguez. You got to see it now. You have to see it.
You have to. And it's, you know, you look through this list of prospects, and I feel like you could blame, one of the questions I was going to ask you is Hal Steinbrenner to blame for the team's shortcomings in the offseason? And maybe you can go there specifically with this offseason. But when I look at holes at third base, I think of Miguel Andujar. I think of Oswald Peraza. I think of the lack of development that's gone towards those guys. When I look at holes in the outfield, you think of guys like Clint Frazier. You think of guys like Jason Dominguez now. A slew of other players comes to mind when it comes to Yankees botched prospect development. But even the hole at shortstop that I think exists right now and could be fixed by the guy there with Anthony Volpe is because of the way that they develop their players. And the stock and the way that these players are put into playing situations is so ill-advised. Oswald Peraza was a top 3 prospect for the Yankees organization. And they don't trade him, but they decide, let's play him for a series here and there over 2 or 3 seasons. He was supposed to be the competitor with Volpe for shortstop.
Right.
He was very highly touted within the organization. And Volpe clearly won it out of spring training 2 years ago. So there was no real, criticism on that decision. Not from me, not from anyone else. Volpe deserved it. But Peraza should have gotten run somewhere else. And they kept catering to Torres and whoever the hell they put at third base, Josh Donaldson, or whoever the decision was, DJ LeMahieu, even Oswaldo Cabrera at times. Peraza never got a chance to even develop, and now he's thrust into another third base competition this spring training. It's just not fair the way that they treat these prospects, and you can't expect any of them to succeed.
It's management of these prospects, and then obviously the development, which we really can't get into because we just don't know the intricacies of that. But the management we could see, and we've said it for years. People have said it for years that they've done a bad job of that, especially the Peraza situation. The one thing I'll say, if you have botched prospects, right? Excuse me, I want to rephrase. If you have bad contracts on your team, right? The way to supplement bad contracts is either you have a rich enough owner who does not give a rat's ass and will just go and spend more, right? And Hal's kind of in the middle there. He doesn't do it to the fullest extent, but he will still spend around that. Or you develop your prospects and you develop these younger guys and they replace it and you almost forget about it, right? Like if the Mets or the Dodgers have a bad contract, they cut that guy. That's it. It's done. And I'm not saying the Yankees should cut Rodon, but like if you have a bad contract on the team and that's holding you back from spending in certain situations, you need to bring players up and they need to indirectly too. It could be a left fielder. If it's a starting pitcher, it could be a left fielder because if you have a need at third base or left field and that $162 million is killing you, you can't spend it. You need to develop those players and they need to supplement the spending that you would make on that third baseman if you didn't have Rodon. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. You're right.
They're not doing that. They're not doing that.
Players like DJ LeMahieu would have been bought out and moved on from by the Mets or the Dodgers before this season. I don't know. I don't think they would have before last season, but this offseason, absolutely, DJ LeMahieu would have been
not on the team. They're not on the team.
Released from the team. Would have never even sniffed spring training. So that's where Hal Steinbrenner does come up short. However, $307 million payroll, they shouldn't have a hole in left field, third base, and backup catcher. Shouldn't happen. That is not on him.
Exactly, and that's where I would be pissed. I'm like, Cashman, I'm spending, Brian, I'm spending all this money. What are we doing? Why do I have a hole in 2 different spots? I would be pissed at that point. I would.
And I think that
I don't need him. I don't need him going to owners' meetings and saying and doing press conferences and saying, I don't think me spending $300 million doesn't correlate. In this situation, it would. If you spent a little bit more here and got a third baseman, it probably would correlate to more winning in the 2025 season.
And really, all that you had to do, you didn't have to go get Bregman. You could have appeased fans for the time being and shown an effort by signing Justin Turner or Yohan Moncada and just saying, Dominguez is our left fielder, so we're not adding there. By the way, Dominguez should not be playing left field, but just adding a third baseman.
But does that even do anything? I mean, does Turner or Moncada do anything at third base for you?
It just
at that
shows
point,
I
would rather give one of the young guys a chance. I'd just say, hey,
shows me. I wouldn't want. First of all, I wouldn't want Turner because I don't want to get older and slower. But it just is showing me that they are acknowledging there is a problem at that position. If you sign Moncada, what was it? What is his contract like? Let me look. What did the Angels give him?
He signed with the Angels?
Yeah. 1 year, $5 million for Yohan Moncada. That's what I would have done. Because I could just send him to the bench if Peraza or Cabrera are better, and Moncada could be a swing guy in the infield. Play every couple days. We need you at second base today. We need you at short today. We need you at third.
I could also see that being, Moncada sucks at one point. Oh, Moncada's in the lineup again at second base.
I could see that completely also. But how much louder will the noise be for LeMahieu, Cabrera, or Peraza hitting 190 in the lineup every day?
And I think you're gonna have to at some point. They're gonna have to make this trade. They're going to make I don't know who it is. I don't know what third baseman's going to be available other than Arenado, but at some point in the next 2 or 3 months, they're going to need a starting third baseman.
And why hasn't Arenado gotten moved?
It's weird. It's so weird. He's there. He's picture days. It's spring training. It's this and that. And he's negotiating trades. He's declining trades to certain places. Why in the hell did he decline a trade to Houston early in the offseason?
He unless it wasn't true, which I think it was, there were credible reporters on that, he just has to not want to go there. And this is another question I've had. Why is Houston trying to trade for Nolan Arenado? They got Paredes in the deal. Now they want to move Paredes to second, Altuve to left, and put Arenado at third?
And isn't it true they're still working Altuve out in left field, even though they have the spot at second?
I'm gonna read you their outfield right now.
Alvarez is full-time DH now.
Alvarez is full-time DH. Yep. Their projected outfield is Chas McCormick, Ben Gamel, and Jake Myers. That is the worst outfield by a significant margin in Major League Baseball.
That's legit.
So what that tells me is they're trying to move Altuve to left because they either have a young prospect that they want to put at second or a bench bat that they want to put at second. Let me look at their prospects. Even though
Ben Gamel twice, by the way, on the pod today.
Yeah, 2 Ben Gamel mentions. Did not expect that. I didn't expect one coming into this, but we're sitting here at 2. Houston Astros process. See, MLB Pipeline, the website, it doesn't even load the Astros prospects. Right,
they're not good. It's one of the worst farm systems.
So bad that they can't even get the website loaded with the Astros.
It's one of the bottom 5, I'm pretty sure, farm systems in the entire sport. They're going nowhere. But they probably will win 85 games this year. But I don't know. I don't even know if that's enough to make the playoffs.
Okay, so they're probably trying to get Cam Smith up because he's their only prospect of note
in the Cubs trade.
Yeah. So probably trying to set up to move Cam Smith. He's a third baseman, but he also plays the rest of the infield besides first. So they're probably trying to get him to second or third before the end of the season.
So that's why Altuve's still on left.
Would go to left.
It's gonna be weird seeing him out there.
Yeah, it is.
I'm not gonna make a joke either.
Him at that left field wall is gonna be ridiculous.
It's gonna be funny. I'm not gonna make any jokes though.
It's gonna be so. Why not?
It's like the fat joke. It's obvious. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. It's not fun. We don't want to
make fun of people's appearance here. It's out of their control.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, but the Astros outfield's going to stink. I don't know what their plan is to get Arenado. That even clouds it more. If you have Cam Smith and you want to pull him up, why are you trying to get Arenado? Arenado makes no sense for Houston. For me, I just don't see it. Unless you're going to send Paredes to St. Louis in a flip, which doesn't make sense either. I think he's going to rake in Houston.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Were they trying for Arenado before or after the trade for Tucker?
Apparently, he turned it down after the Tucker trade.
See, that doesn't make any sense.
And they've still been rumored to be talking with them. That just came up the other day again. It was Astros and Cardinals have re-engaged in talks.
So weird a situation. It's probably so annoying for the Cardinals that the perfect fit is the Yankees and they want nothing to do with him.
Yeah, and this is another team that is just absolutely in Houston. What are you doing? I mean, you sign Christian Walker, and then you trade Kyle Tucker. What? Why are we operating this way? You have one of the best players in baseball, a guy who's going to be a $400 million free agent next offseason, but you won't give out a 6-year deal or more. So you're
We gotta
fine with
trade him.
moving on from them. But they're not. It's not like they trade them and then they decide we're not going to compete for a year or two because they go get Christian Walker. If you get Christian Walker, you're trying to win a World Series in the next 2 seasons. He's 34.
And they needed Paredes in the deal. Like they needed to have Paredes in the deal. That was one guy they needed. And that's a competitive move. That's a move that says, okay, I still want to win this season.
And then you have the Cubs at the same time acquire Kyle Tucker, trade Cody Bellinger. Who is competing? And then not add anyone else. Who wants to compete in Major League Baseball?
By the way, people think they're going to be good this year too, the Cubs. And I think they'll win some games. I think they'll compete for the division, but I've seen some projections that have them at 90 wins. I don't think they're close to. I don't think they're a 90-win team.
I'd be shocked if they made the playoffs. They can. I see the path because of how bad the division is. I'd still be I don't think they're going to be better than Cincinnati or Milwaukee.
I think Milwaukee should still be considered the favorite in the division. I don't know about Cincinnati. I think the Cubs could be better than Cincinnati.
I think Francona is going to elevate that team this year in a nice way.
He is. I love Francona. I love him.
Good young team that probably needs.
Yeah. But I could see them being like an 82, 81 win team and the Cubs being like an 83, 84 win team.
They're going to be within
just
2 or 3
based on adding Tucker. Yeah, just based on adding Tucker. Like you added the best player in the division.
What's
right?
the Cubs
besides Steen, position player?
The Cubs over-under win totals 85.5. Brewers are 83.5. Cubs are the favorite to win the division.
I go over on the Brewers.
And you know who's a bad one? Royals 83.5 is a bad line. That team's going to win 5 or 6 more games than that, I think.
You think?
In that division? Do they not feel like the best team in that division? I thought the Jonathan India trade, very good move.
What trade?
India.
Who do they have as the favorite?
I think it is the Royals. Oh, no, the Twins. 84.
The Twins are at what? 84.5?
1 game better. And Cleveland is at 82.5.
I like I think the same reason why you like the Reds, I like the Tigers with Hinch. Like, I think
I forgot about the Tigers. Hold on, wait, yeah, they're the way that it is Twins 84.5, Royals 83.5, Tigers 83.5, Guardians 82.5, and then White Sox 53.5.
Yeah, nice for the White Sox.
Under.
I go over. I would take the Tigers. If a gun to my head right now, I would take the Tigers.
Tigers are a good one. I mean, I think when you look at their lineup last year, adding Torres is a pretty significant add.
Yeah, unfortunately for them.
Which is embarrassing.
Right.
But the problem now, though, is you are looking for the starters, including Skubal, to repeat their success.
Flaherty, obviously, Jackson Jobe, their big prospect coming up at some point this season.
The last wild card spot with the Cy Young pitcher. So you're looking for a slight lineup improvement. Lineup wins you a couple more games than last year.
Which it should.
And an almost identical pitching season. But you might have... all right, this might be a little crazy. I don't know if this is really possible. The AL Central winner could possibly have less wins than the 6th seed. I don't know if that is really mathematically possible, though.
It's in the AL, you're saying?
In the AL for the Central, and I mean that could happen in the NL too. That the Central winners have the least wins in the playoffs. The 3 seed has the worst.
Yeah, that's certainly possible.
But I don't know. Is it because we're seeing every year like an 84, 85 win team get in? And I feel like the division winners are definitely 86 plus.
Well, I think in the National League, it's more likely because you're going to have some juggernaut teams as those wild card teams. Like you're going to have Braves, Mets, Phillies, Diamondbacks, 3 of those teams be wild card teams. So that's certainly possible.
If we want to talk about locks, like playoff locks, which don't exist, but NL, you have Dodgers, Braves, Phillies, Mets, D-backs.
Don't put the Mets in there. Please don't put the Mets in. Don't put a lock next to that.
And the Padres are like the 6 teams. Obviously, one of them can't get in. So it's not literally locks. I just don't have a better term.
Right.
But then you need – so if the Mets, Phillies, Braves, Dodgers, Diamondbacks all win 88 games plus, that's realistic. That's possible. Even 87 games plus.
And then the Mets won 89 games last year.
And the Braves won 88. So that is... Did the Brewers win 88 games last year? They won 90, right?
They won more games than the Mets.
Yeah, Brewers, I think, had 90 wins.
They were over 90.
Either way, it's possible then for the 5 teams outside of the Central in the playoffs to win 88 plus games.
I don't think that's going to happen I don't think it's going to happen in the American League, though. I don't think this season it'll happen.
I agree with you. The reason I said that, though, is because I think the AL Central teams are worse than the NL Central teams.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that.
Yeah, because Twins, Royals, Tigers are probably worse. I think the Royals are the best team there. I think the Royals win the division. But the
Cubs have some legit players, and again, we're not as high, but they have legit players. The Brewers just won the division again last season, and I think they'll do it again. You have the Reds, who are young and have a really good manager. Yeah. The Pirates, if the league wasn't so loaded, I think you'd be talking about them a little bit more. I don't think they're going to be a sneaky team, but they're not bad. The Cardinals might be bad. The Cardinals might win like 72, 73 games.
Yeah.
I think that the Pirates are like a 78, 77 win team around there.
We'll do actual predictions, obviously, in 2-3 weeks.
Do over-unders.
Earlier, but
under.
Yeah. But I think in the AL, who are the playoff teams in the AL? It's Yankees win the AL East. West, I think Texas.
I think Texas is going to win it.
And then who are the other teams? Like outside of those 2, and even Texas, I'm not totally high on.
Boston's a lock.
Boston, I think, will get in. I think Baltimore is going to find a way to win enough games.
They'll probably get in. So now you're at 4.
They're 4. Does Houston get in?
Well, it's going to be between Houston and Seattle. If Seattle can do anything better offensively, their pitching staff's going to be really good again. But can they hit?
I could see Seattle going over their 84.5 wins, but I could also see them winning 78 games, 79 games.
I'm not going to predict it, but
yeah, I would never go as far as predicting that team.
I think 2 years ago I had them winning the World Series, or going into 2023, I had them in it against the Phillies.
They haven't won a playoff game for 22 years?
Yeah, no, not happening. Not going to predict them to make
it. Yeah, so I think in the AL, it'll be Yankees win the East.
Red Sox, Orioles
both get in.
Texas Houston
gets in. Houston gets in, and Kansas City, I think, would get in.
Right. But I think there's a chance that, let's just say the top 2 teams in the Central are Detroit, Kansas City. They're competing with the second team in the AL West for that wild card. Maybe. Because that's how weak the league is this season.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's a good point. The league is the American League is a joke this year.
It's a joke.
Because now the Yankees feel worse. But the Yankees feel worse, and they feel a good margin better than the second team.
More of a favorite than they were last. I would certainly agree with that. And they are not the team they were last season. They're just not.
No, they're not. And listen, that means they could absolutely lose to Texas or Boston in the postseason, or Baltimore. Whoever gets in, I could see beating the Yankees, but they are more of a favorite than they were last year, for sure. The AL did nothing to get better. We talked about it in December or maybe early January, and I made a video about it.
Mm-hmm.
The AL, Soto to the NL, Tucker to the NL, Naylor to the NL, Burns to the NL. Besides the Yankees getting Fried and Bellinger, because I'm not even going to count Goldschmidt, Christian Walker was the only significant movement from the NL to AL.
Yeah.
And out of the guys that moved to the NL, if you made a list and included Christian Walker on it, he'd be last out of those hitters.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
It's going to be, the National League is going to be a gauntlet. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
It is. It's going to be a blast. And the AL should be a nice cruise control this year for I'm not going to say that, but just for the teams that are performing well. You should have a nice by the second week of June, you could feel really good about, like, we can chill because we're making the playoffs in the AL.
If you're that team, if you're the top team. Yeah.
If you're the top team. If Texas was to go on a huge run and just be 6-7 games up in the division in June, you're like, we're in.
It's my guy DeGrom. Yeah.
Yeah, he's back.
Sad. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm watching. I'm rooting for him.
Yeah. All right, wrap it. Good up today. 2 Ben Gamel mentions. Never saw that coming. Jam was on it.
Crazy.
Appreciate everyone tuning in, though. Our first and last Ben Gamel mentions of 2025.
Definitely not.
Definitely not. Definitely our first. Definitely not our last.
Yeah.
Because we will be talking about that Astros outfield where Ben Gamel is the premier player in the group. But we'll be back next week. And we're changing a lot of the format next week and then moving. I think next week is kind of the turning point for us into the 2025 season. We'll be in March. We'll be ready to start rolling. So stay tuned for that. We appreciate you listening. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts and Spotify after these lives. And we'll put out a schedule soon as to when we will be live every week this offseason, obviously. It's been a little scattered. So thanks for listening. Make sure to check out the playbook on Instagram. Make sure to check out the Hardline. Great offseason football content coming from the Hardline. A little bit of a remodeled version of the show.
This week.
Can't wait for that. And NFL Combine this week. So we'll have a new draft guide next week on Monday and more video content for you on Instagram, on TikTok. And I'm going to be bringing some draft stuff to YouTube after the Combine. So stay tuned for it. And we will see you in the next Burrows.